a seasoned person in the litigation settlement space, and I mean, you're going to give some background, but I think that for a long time we've been running with fixed income, not with very minimal returns from fixed income investments, and it's really caused a kind of imbalance in the way investing models are done, where people have moved more towards alternatives. And we're going to have three alternative credit managers speaking in the next hour and a half, and Roni's one of them. And we've looked a lot at litigation settlements in the past as a group. So I'm hoping that Roni can talk about where litigation settlements are today, what his specialization is in that sector, and then we'll go from there. So Roni, why don't you take it away? Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. So I'm going to take this conversation from an earlier perspective and try to help everyone understand how they should diligence these trades. So litigation finance is an alternative asset class that delivers pure alpha. I've been in this trade since 1996. I was a practicing attorney. I came to this trade because of the cash flow issues that most personal injury or contingency fee attorneys have. Their fees are episodic and unpredictable, and litigation can take 2 to 7 years. So when you add all of that up, matching your assets and liabilities are very difficult, to say the least. Now, since the 90s, you've had different types of litigation finance arrive. Mine happens to be a very niche product within that overall space. The more traditional litigation finance is a couple of lawyers or former lawyers get together, they look at a case, they assess the case, they believe that they understand what the judge is going to do, the law, and what a jury is going to do, and how likely a case is going to settle. If they can assess all of those factors correctly, they can advance into a case and hopefully make a nice multiplier on their return. That's one end of the spectrum. What I like to call people who pretend to be smarter than everyone else, because those are a lot of factors to predict. It's doable. When you're diligencing those types of opportunities, what you really need to look at is their cash on cash performance. It's very easy. Since these investments take anywhere from 2 to 7 years to liquidate, what you really have to look at is how often they've been able to monetize these previous purchases or acquisitions. A simpler approach, in my mind, is when you're advancing fees to lawyers on, how should I put it, on their costs. Most lawyers don't take on cases that they think they're going to lose. So they'll invest money. The lender in those cases will hold the capital for a period of time until the case monetizes, and then they'll get their costs back plus a rate of return. The problem that you have in that asset class or that niche of litigation finance is what happens, and you actually have this in the shooting for the stars approach also, where you're trying to bet on the outcome of an IP litigation. What happens if the intervening law firm blows up on you? Litigation goes on 2 to 4 years. Egos get in the way. Things of that nature happen. Disputes between partners. Clients decide to leave law firms. Lawyers decide to leave law firms. What happens to the case in that instance? So these are all things that you have to consider when investing in litigation finance. I tend to be a little more boring, let's put it that way. I go for singles and doubles. This has always been our approach. We look at litigation finance as simple discounted cash flows. When settlements occur that are payable by insurance carriers, municipalities, or Fortune 500 type entities, we will try to purchase those cash flows at a discount, underwrite the length of time that it's going to take to get approval to disperse the money, and then ultimately collect it. So if you can get involved in a litigation once a settlement has occurred, once a judgment has been obtained and a corpus of money restrained, you can approximate the length of time that it's going to take to collect the receivable. And if your payer is an insurance carrier, municipality, and a Fortune 500 type entity, your non-payment risk on that end is de minimis. So you could effectively purchase capital at an 18 to 24% ROI. That is how we structure our transactions. Our risks are theft of cash and duration going longer than expected.
Hey, Ronnie, I just want to
Yes.
jump in here. Can you give us some perspective in terms of size of market, how many opportunities come up annually, deal flow? Do you have more deals than you can fund, et cetera?
Sure. We deal in the smallest aspect of litigation finance. Our market, we believe, is probably in the vicinity of $500 million. Our current AUM is about 150. We were at 350. We've collected some rather large opportunities that we've previously outlaid on. We source all of our transactions. Historically, I'm not a big fan of working with brokers because I find that they tend to oversell the opportunities. And the most important, and in many ways, it's easier to do larger transactions than smaller transactions. So we tend to be a small boutique type of investment firm where we're looking for unique opportunities. What's happened in this space since the financial crisis is you've gotten a lot of new players into this space. And when that happens, people have a tendency of over advancing and undercharging for the yield that they're taking. So we try to play on the borders of our space, find unique opportunities where we tend to be the sole players in the space. One of our more interesting trades was one involving data analytics in the medical subrogation space. Imagine situations where Medicare Part C providers are entitled to reimbursement under the Medicare Secondary Payer Act, and the way that you go about doing it is gathering the data from Medicare providers and then interfacing with the insurance companies in such a way that you can get these subrogation rights collected. These are the type of trades, the opportunity size in this market where you could buy known and predictable and somewhat predictable cash flows is probably $300 to $500 million. And we typically don't chase the deals that our counterparties chase because we're a different risk profile. I personally like sleeping at night, hitting singles and doubles, and acquiring what I believe to be known and predictable cash flows at reasonable discounts. Questions? Marty?
Ronnie, you've got about 15 minutes or so, or 10 minutes. But what I want to talk about is, how do your returns outperform fixed income, for example? I mean, obviously, we know there's been this tremendous, I don't even know what you call it, movement in fixed income where rates have been flat for years and years and years. And so, how do you compete with that? And also, if you look at high yield right now, I think it's at its all-time low, right? So how are you outperforming these credit instruments? And then, what's your risk profile versus with them, for example?
So I think we've been delivering double-digit returns to our investors or note purchasers for years. We have a preferred cumulative structure. The difference is that the typical law firm is not bankable. Banks don't appreciate the legal settlements as being a form of acceptable collateral. They're just not accustomed to it. They're very illiquid assets. We will get involved in an asset any time that there is a settlement or a judgment or even an MOU, and you won't see the money collect for 2 to 5 years post that event. Those aren't the types of assets that banks could get invested in. The bonds that you're talking about are not delivering those types of yields. We've been able to deliver it for years. I've been doing this in a fund structure since 2007.
Understood, Ronnie. Do you have any perspective on why fixed income is at an all-time low, or not really? It's irrelevant to what your strategy is. All you know is you're outperforming, right?
What I know is what our current performance has been. I would hate. Look, we're in a zero rate environment.
Correct.
It's as simple as that. Maybe we're going to get into a hyperinflationary period right now. I don't even want to go down that road. But the point of the matter is we've been in a zero rate environment for years. There is a disconnect in the litigation finance market because the assets aren't bankable. And it's really a function of understanding your risk return profile. Do you want to try to hit for the ROIs of the 20s and 30s, or are you more interested in single digit or double digits? If you're shooting for the moon and you've got a portion of your investable funds that you're willing to invest for high yield, you're going to go all in to the traditional litigation finance strategy. But what I would advise people to do is do your diligence. We all know that all of these people that are doing it are exceedingly bright, but now look into their performance over their last 10 years. And while what you might see is that they've deployed $100, $200, $500 million. But the magical question is this: how much of that have you collected? And what remains outstanding? We're all told that past performance is not indicative of future performance. We all know that. It holds particularly true in litigation finance when you're effectively investing on the come all the time. What you've collected yesterday doesn't necessarily equate to what you will collect tomorrow. Those are two different animals.
Hey, Ronnie. So I just want to get, you mentioned hyperinflationary. So that brings, how does litigation settlements react in hyperinflation? Is there an adjustment? Number one. Number two, what's the duration of your investment? Like, so again, I mean, I would imagine if it's short duration, you're probably doing pretty good. If it's longer duration, maybe you're impacted by hyperinflation. So can you talk about that?
So let's go back to the financial crisis. You saw interest rates go up to, I don't know, 14%. We're not, whether it's 2008, 2012, we've not been affected by hyperflation and increased in rates. We've been consistently able to charge our attorney clients anywhere from 16 to 24% per annum compounded monthly as we structure our transactions as purchases. We don't structure them as loans. What we've branched into is, instead of only investing money or advancing money to attorneys, today we'll purchase money or cash flow rights from plaintiffs, as well as individual plaintiffs, as well as corporate plaintiffs. Think of the MasterCard interchange settlement recently. Vendors like Sears were entitled to portions of the $6 billion settlement. You were able, through their bankruptcy estate, you were able at one point to go in and attempt to purchase those rights. So because we have always been able to charge our clients since 1996 somewhere between 16 and 24% per annum. What's happening in the rest of the world in terms of inflation or not only affects the amount of capital that comes in. It doesn't affect the disconnect in the market between what a bank will do and whether or not they will lend to this client.
Sure. Roni, just to ask another question. Are you structured as a 2 and 20 fund, or do you just provide a pref? How does that work?
We structure our so we have two vehicles. We have a domestic fund where we pay 12.5%, a preferred cumulative return, where the investor makes the first 12.5%. We've just launched our first exchange-based solution on the Frankfurt Exchange, where we're paying investors a 9.5% coupon on those investments that are housed in that vehicle.
What's the lockup of your fund?
Excuse me?
What's the lockup of your fund?
A year. But I wouldn't suggest that anyone think about a lockup for this reason. We have lockups, and there's clearly a mismatch between our liquidity and our ability to deliver cash. Settlements typically take 2 to 7 years. So we'll get invested in a transaction as a settlement occurs, but still requires court approval. So there's a remaining litigation, the court approval process. So these tend to be larger transactions, class actions or mass torts, where the parties will enter into a settlement and you've got an approval process that must occur afterwards, and then a distribution process. Those two items can take 2 to 5 years to disperse. So we could have liquidity periods of a year, but then due to the underlying cases that we are invested in rather, it could still take 3 to 4 years to exit the strategy. No one should go into this strategy in any form of litigation finance thinking that they are very liquid. They are very illiquid, and it's something that has to be managed by the manager.
Hey, Ronnie, another question. So what about co-investment? Are limited partners allowed to co-invest in deals as well?
Yes, we typically look to outsiders for very large transactions. We're looking at a transaction now involving several $100 million, involving a corpus of money that has to be returned to America in a litigation, and we're speaking to some rather large funds. For transactions that are 10, 20, $30 million, we typically do not do co-investments. Co-investments are typically 50 million plus.
Got it. And for some of your, do you do external fund deal like special purpose vehicles, things like that?
Excuse me, say that again?
You do special purpose vehicles outside of the fund?
So the European structure where we partner with someone that's located in London and the Frankfurt Exchange, those are all done in SPVs. The domestic vehicle is an LP type structure.
Fantastic, Ronnie. Listen, Ronnie, actually, I have a million questions for you. I'm going to send some over the chat.
Absolutely.
But it would be great if you can stick around and answer some of these questions. And, you know, I'll just ask you this last question. So, you know, there's always been a 60-40 investment model for equities and fixed income. Fixed income obviously has been flat or zero for years. And any ideas about like how much portfolio should be allocated to fixed income versus alternative credit? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. I would invest no more than 5 to 15% of your money in alternatives. That would be my recommendation because of the illiquidity.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, so that's alternative credits. Okay, gotcha. I probably have a couple other questions, but I have to get on to the next speaker. But Ronnie, this is very informative, and 12.5% is like fantastic returns for clipping a coupon, although I guess you have a lockup, so there's a liquidity premium. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Ronnie.
You're welcome.
Stick around and you can